Hello, everyone. I've got a special guest with me today. Her name is Kogane. Welcome to the show.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
Thank you for coming on. So, Kim, please introduce yourself and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Kim, and I call myself an inner wisdom guide, and we'll get into more what that means. And I'm also a writer and a podcast host.
Wonderful. And so, it already sounds to me like you've got a creative mix there. So I'd love to get into a little bit of that more. But I'm curious, I guess, in terms of the um, inner wisdom side of things. Like, where did the inner wisdom or where did this journey all start for you?
Yeah, so it started, I've always been really connected to my intuition, and it's come up at different points in my life, but it really started last year. So when COVID hit, I was running a jewelry company that I had started for 10 years. And when we had to pause for COVID, I kind of realized that it was no longer something that I loved. And I decided to let it go and embark on a new journey. And I signed up for this training called Inner Voice Facilitator Training, where I learned not only how to connect and listen to my own inner wisdom or intuition, but I was also able to facilitate that for other people, which I think is so powerful.
Mm, wow. Okay. That's interesting. The inner voice. So, what do you mean by like connecting with your intuition?
Yeah, so I like to describe the intuition as kind of like that gut feeling, or like when someone's telling a story or you see something that you're really drawn to, like sometimes you'll feel those tingles or just that inner knowing, like when you can't really explain the feeling, but you know that you have to go in a certain direction. To me, those are all um, the inner voice and the
Mhm.
intuition.
Right. Okay.
And when we're able to connect with that, I've learned that it can actually speak to you and tell you beautiful things and give you guidance and help you make decisions in your life.
Hmm. What drew you towards taking this kind of training or like getting drawn towards connecting with your own intuition?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to my jewelry days. So I had started that business when I was working full time at a call center, which was really a draining job. So I worked full time at the call center for a year while I was starting my jewelry company. And it was something that I just loved. Like I really wanted to work all the time. And I feel like I went on that very typical entrepreneurial journey where I was like not sleeping, I was working all the time, and it was just so exciting. And I was really passionate about it. And then as time passed and as I grew it, I became more and more disconnected from the thing that really lit me up. And ultimately, I think I realized that like what it grew into was something that I was no longer passionate about it. I kind of fell out of love with the business, and it was an interesting realization and to see like, okay, this was my dream job and I thought that I'd be doing it forever. And then I realized that the dream that I had when I was in my early 20s was no longer the dream for me in my early 30s.
Yeah, because dreams can change over time as you evolve throughout your life as well. So I'm curious, like the dream job initially with jewelry, what was exciting about that, or how did you get into all of that?
Yeah, so I had grown up in a really creative household. My mom always was giving us different projects to do, and making jewelry was always something that was like a stress reliever. And it was just when I felt most at peace. And I think when I started that company, um, there was an economic recession happening in the US at the time. And so I really was looking at all of my skills and wanting to get out of my job at the call center. And so I was like, okay, this is what my degree is in, but I can also make jewelry. Like, what are things that I can actually turn into a viable income? And I started just making jewelry, selling it, and kind of building that up. And it was also really fun for me. I think being creative is really important to me. And what I loved
Mhm.
about having my own business was that I was able to do a lot of different things. Every day was different, and I wasn't ever doing the same tasks.
Yeah. So variety was important to you then in terms of that need for, I guess, expressing creativity.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I kind of always knew deep down, but I maybe denied myself because I think like we're kind of taught that we should go on one kind of career trajectory and build it up over time, which again I think is what I tried to do in the jewelry company. And
Mm-hmm.
with making it my dream job, it was like, okay, I'm gonna stick this out and really build, and this is my one thing. But the reality is that I think a lot of us are meant to be more generalists and try different things and shift in our careers over time. And even our interests and hobbies, like they change as we change.
Mm. That's true. And when you said initially that, like this dream job of like making jewelry and providing that to people, that it was a stress relief and like provided you with some peace. Now, if you go and turn that into a full blown business as well, I'm sure it'd be like the story becomes very different. So can you
Yeah.
give us, I guess, an idea of like, at which point did you feel like, this is just not what I resonate with anymore. This is not what I want to do anymore.
Yeah, I think it was. I maybe stayed a few years too long. But when I entered into that space, and why I kind of left the idea of going on kind of a corporate trajectory was that I was never someone who wanted to sit in meetings all day. I wanted my time to be my own. I wanted to be free to pursue what I wanted, to take a trip if I wanted. And I just didn't want to sit at a desk all day. And in the beginning, I had that, but what I noticed later on, as you build a company and as you're kind of the one leading the team, you're not doing those tasks. Like I wasn't making the jewelry as much anymore. I was more managing people who were making jewelry, and I found myself sitting in meetings all day and being at a desk. And that's when I
Mm.
realized that the business evolved and grew, and I evolved and grew, and we kind of just grew apart.
Yeah, I can see where that disconnection would lie because you becoming like the person who's actually directly creating all the products then becomes commercialized. And then you are just the person making all the decisions and managing is like two different
Mhm.
things, two different worlds.
Yeah, it's very different. And I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs go through because they start something usually because they're passionate about it. And then they maybe spend 10% of their time doing that. And over time, it becomes even less.
Mm. And that's, I guess, where people got to be quite careful about passions because there's this, like you said, like having this one thing or like going after your passions, like it's a big culture of like pushing people towards that. But then on the other side, I guess to be mindful, I mean, with passions, it can change depending on like what direction you take it in. But from your experience, yeah, like shed some light into how we can be flexible with passions and what are the downfalls of going after your passions.
Yeah, I think that if I could go back in time, I probably would still do it all over again, and a younger version of me wouldn't listen to my advice. But I think I wish that someone would have kind of warned me and explained that when you turn your passion into a business, it turns into a job. Like even though it's a job that you love, it's still a job. And when you attach money to it and career and all of that, all of those things, it really does change it. And that like it's okay to have hobbies and to do things just for fun. Like a passion doesn't have to become a career. It can just remain like a hobby, and you can love it, and that doesn't devalue it at all.
Mm. It's one of those things where like excuse me. I'll edit it out. It's all good.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. It's one of those things where I could see, and being like a past creative myself as well, that um, it's quite common with people who are going after things like when they have like musicians, for example, like writing,
Mhm.
like things that they really love to do, but then they really try and like put all their eggs in one basket and go, hey, like I got to try and make some money out of this, and then it starts to actually eat at them. It becomes a bit toxic as
For
well.
sure. And I think it's really dangerous when you start to chase money. I think that was a lesson that I learned of. I was always happiest, and I felt like my business was always the most successful when I was doing it because I
Mm,
found joy in it and I didn't care about the money.
mm,
And where things really shifted is once I had a storefront and I had a staff, like I had certain responsibilities that I had to meet, and I had to make choices to make sure that I could make payroll, to pay the rent, to do all of these to keep the business afloat. And it definitely influenced my decision making and how I kind of grew and the business and what I did and did not do.
mm. Yeah, definitely. And in terms of like when you sort of got to the end of that, how did you come to that decision that enough was enough and that, you know, it was time for to let it go?
Yeah, so it was August of 2020, and I was looking at having to reopen my retail stores because that was the time when things were kind of opening back up for the first time. And I really didn't want to do it. Like it felt in my body, it felt so heavy and like such a burden. And I had signed up for this inner voice facilitator training. And once I did that and I kind of toyed with the idea of releasing the jewelry company, I immediately felt lighter. I felt this
Mm,
sense of relief wash over me, and I knew that it was the right decision. And so I really just went all in on myself, and it was really hard. I had to let my staff go, and it was really hard to let people go during a pandemic and say like, "Hey, you don't have a job anymore." But I think it would be doing a disservice to them for me to keep doing something that made me unhappy so that they could have a job. And I also released them to find something that was more aligning for them as well.
mm.
And so I signed up for this inner voice training, and my whole life changed, really.
Yeah, what happened there? Like, what did you learn?
Yeah. So through that time, it's so funny because you think about um like you think about like a coaching training or like a yoga teacher training, and it feels like you have to go through all these steps and kind of like pass these tests. And inner voice facilitator training is really loose and free in comparison, and it's really not about learning how to say the right things or how to do a session. That's such a minor part of it. It's really about finding stillness and being able to sit with yourself and connect to not only what your intuition is saying, but just connecting to your body and saying, like, okay, where do I feel this in my body? Like, what are the stories that my mind is telling me? What am I really afraid of?
Mm,
And working through a lot of that in that container. And so through that, I met some amazing people, and I really learned a lot about myself while simultaneously kind of selling everything from my business to like shut it down. So that was a really interesting time of just like a lot of highs
that's
and
huge.
lows, and
Yeah.
really just this big shift happening.
Give people an idea of like the struggles, you know, because I mean, that to me is already like, whoa, like really, it's heavy energy.
Yeah.
Making that kind of shift, especially when you have quite a lot of responsibility and people who rely on you for their income and their livelihoods and all of that.
Yeah.
Um, Talk us through for you know business owner like you, the struggles of like psychologically or emotionally, mentally. What are the struggles like in terms of making that kind of big decision and transformation?
Yeah. So what I learned during that process was not only was I shedding this business, but I had created an entire identity around being a business owner. Like this jewelry company gave me purpose. It made me feel good about myself. I was able to show up to the world in this really shiny way, I thought. And when I let go of that, my mind was kept telling me like, if you close jewelry business, then you're not going to have any friends because people were only friends with you because you were Kim, the jewelry company owner. And, that came true a little bit. Like certain relationships no longer made sense. But that was a really difficult fear to work through. And I really felt lost for a long time, like for the entire year. I feel like only now am I really starting to feel like myself again. And I like to describe it for people as like my skin and my body and my being just felt like an itchy sweater. Like I felt uncomfortable all of the time.
Mm,
And
yeah.
that feeling of like when you're wearing like an outfit that doesn't really fit you, or you're like wearing an itchy sweater and it's just constantly irritating you, but you kind of have to push through it. That's what this transitional space felt like. And there were days where I felt like I was in flow, as they kind of call it in the woo woo community.
Hmm.
Everything was lining up. I felt like really, really high and happy, and just like, this was the best decision I ever made. And then there were really low points where there were moments where I felt like I was going through kind of like an ego death, but my mind was like, this is the end. Like it was so dramatic, like you're over, like you'll never do anything again. And so it was just this period of really feeling lost and
Mm. So it was
confused.
quite like it was in your mind, but it was also in your body in terms of like just the sensations of this whole
Yes,
thing. Yeah.
exactly. And on top of that, you know, we were going through a period where we really had to isolate. So, like, even if I had wanted to reach out to community, I was really limited because we were kind of sheltering in place and places were closed. And the ways in which I had found community were no longer available to me. So, like, my jewelry company, I found community and friendship through that. I was close with my staff, and that went away. I really find community in movement, like going to workout classes, and we couldn't do that because of the pandemic. So, like, that
Mm.
was gone. And I felt like I just had to strip everything away, and I was really just stuck with myself, completely vulnerable and raw.
Mm. Because you can't channel that like the usual busyness energy or like into anything else, whether it's the people or the projects or the business, when everything else around you forces you to be by yourself essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think what I did was I really just channeled myself into healing. So, like, I did this inner voice training, and then right after, I was like, I'm going to learn how to do like energy healing and Reiki for people. So I like went through that. I did a yoga teacher training. And these were all really great learning experiences. And I'm glad that I did them. But what I noticed is I just kept coming back to the inner voice and the simplicity of sitting with myself, whether that's in meditation, whether it's through journaling. Sometimes it's just talking in like voice memos to myself. I feel like when I'm in the car driving around, that's when I feel really the most present with myself. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'll like record little voice notes on my phone as I'm driving around. But that feeling and that space where you're just really sitting with yourself is the most powerful thing.
For sure. Because a lot of the times, like, I mean, I could see that if you're someone who is so driven and ambitious and like always like wanting to create as well and connect, that when you are by yourself, it's easy to just go back to like your normal vices, your normal patterns of like, I want to do these things. Well, I'll just go and learn something else. I'll just keep learning. And, there you can get into this cycle of like, well, if I've got nothing else to do, I'll just keep reading more books or doing more things. And it's like this doing energy all the time rather than actually like being, like you said, being in the stillness and really like tuning in to like what's going on.
Yeah, I think it can be so seductive. This kind of happened to me in when I was going to therapy of like, okay, I just need to heal this part and then I'll be okay. I just need to heal this part. And I kind of became really addicted to healing myself and trying to like fix all of the things. And it's not really about that. It's about recognizing that like you are whole always. First and foremost, you are whole and you don't need to be fixed. And
Mm-hmm.
there are things that we can heal, but that doesn't mean that you are broken.
Mm, yeah, yeah, absolutely. You've got to really start from a place that you really do. You are everything, and
Mm,
everything is you in a sense,
yeah,
rather than like,
that,
because
yeah.
people always like come from lack. They're like, oh, but like when I have this, or when I do this, when I accomplish this, it's like there's always some destination to be.
Yeah, there's always like somewhere new to go. And I think, again, I actually didn't really intend to talk about my jewelry days as much, but I feel like there's just so many good lessons there. And I always think back to those days where the biggest, like when I had like a really big media feature, or like I was on TV, or I had an event, those high moments were always the worst moments. I always felt the most alone because it was always me at the end of the night cleaning up the store or going home and celebrating alone, because I started the business alone. So no one really understood what it meant for me to accomplish certain things because they weren't there in the beginning, you know? And
Mm.
it really just struck me that those moments of true, like what were supposed to be the happiest moments of my life and my career, were the saddest and the times where I felt the most depressed. And that was really something that I took with me from those days, and something I don't wish to repeat.
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective because, like it's as an audience, or people who aren't in the limelight, when we see other people in the limelight or like doing their thing, showing up and like really going after what they want, and whether it's fame or fortune, all of that, that glitz and glamour is really appealing.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh my God, like this person, or I know this person who's done that. And if you're that person who's standing out there in the public eye, and really promoting, what you love and what you do, then people really admire that. They're really inspired. But then for the person who's on the other side, you as well, you're saying that like actually those highs were actually lows.
Mhm.
Yeah. But at the
Yeah.
time, I mean, when you are doing it, are you feel like, does it make you feel important, like feel good, and like, you know, that you're being
Yeah.
recognized?
I feel like it can be exciting, and I think like there is an opportunity. Like what I always loved was being able to connect with people and hear their stories, and I loved connecting with my customers and selling them a piece of jewelry that was going to become, a story in their life, whether it was an engagement or, something they were giving to their daughter, or a connection point with a best friend. Those were always really the highs for me. Um, but like honestly, like having like one follower on Instagram to me felt the same as like 10,000. And the more people I had watching me, the more I felt pressured because I really didn't want to disappoint anyone. Um,
Mm,
and
yeah.
that's just, you really, honestly, you have no control over whether you disappoint someone or not, because you don't know how they're interpreting your story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because, yeah, sometimes you can really get caught up with the numbers. I mean, there's so many algorithms, there's so many metrics now, that people go after. And sometimes it's not really telling the full story of how, just because you have one follower to 10,000 or 1 million, um, it could be the same, or it could make you feel even more smaller in that situation in terms of the amount of judgment goes up.
Yeah, for sure. I think the more you open yourself up, the more you can receive like criticism or feedback from people, and it can be challenging. But I think the most important thing is to make sure that you're doing something because you like doing it, not because of the outcome. So, like right now, I write because I love to write. I love the process, even though it's like very frustrating sometimes when you're like sitting down and nothing comes out. But I love the process of writing. So, even if I don't publish anything ever, it doesn't matter to me because I love sitting down in front of my computer or with my journal and going through that and sharing my voice through my words.
Yeah, that's really powerful point, is that, yep, to say that again, is that not to do something because of the outcome, but do it because you like it or you love it.
And
Mm,
you enjoy the process of it.
yeah, it's so important because it's sometimes it's easier to say like, oh yeah, I'm going to go and do this, because it's going to give me this or whatever. But when you actually get into it, it's like everything becomes a process as well. And
Yeah.
if you don't like enjoy it or can endure it, it's just like it can be pretty tough. That's when people start to like, oh, give up, or they change and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Totally.
Okay. Um, what else? Give anything else on your side in terms of like where you are now with judgment and, you know, like things now that you've gone from being really external and like, you know, like having this business and being out there to now really going within and connecting with yourself. Where
Yeah.
are you now with like your yourself?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a period of integration. So like I was in a, I was really outward facing, looking for external validation. I was really like making myself seen, with the jewelry company. And then I just completely quit it all and I went inward deeply. And I kind of went into hiding when I did that. And I didn't share anything on social media. Like I didn't really share much. And I kind of just spent a lot of time by myself. And now I'm at a point where it's time to balance the two. I actually was chatting with one of my mentors this morning, and we were kind of talking about like what's holding me back from sharing on social media and posting on Instagram, because I spent a lot of time on that platform, but I haven't been posting. And I realized that I was afraid to put myself out there again. I was afraid to get negative feedback or for people to critique me or to think that maybe, I kind of got wrapped up in wanting that external validation and feeling afraid that I was going to get negative feedback. But I think like in doing that, I was really holding myself back. And it's time really to put myself out there again and start just sharing, not because I want to gain followers, but sharing because that's who I am. That's what's in alignment for me. And, one of my values as a person is really to be vulnerable and share my experiences with the hope that others can see themselves in my story and can see that like it's okay to go through struggles. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to, you know, to just go through these challenges of being human.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's an entire journey of life, right? So it's like,
It
and you
is,
go, there's
yeah.
many different phases. And it seems like for you, like you've really gone through, I guess, a phase of being the butterfly to then sort of going into a new caterpillar and transform.
Yeah,
And now you're like in a
exactly.
phase of, I guess, being in the cocoon again, sort of like
Yeah, I feel
redirecting like a new butterfly potentially.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like I'm at the point where maybe the cocoon is starting to crack and it's like really uncomfortable to like kind of become a butterfly again. But yeah, like this journey is it can be so cyclical. And um, I think also like what is really important to me is to share that the best guidance that I've found for myself has come from within. Like, it's really
Mm.
beautiful and wonderful to have people hold space for you, whether it's through coaching or, inner voice sessions or therapy or whatever it is. Having space held for you is really an important part of it. But you also have to go within because that little voice inside of you, that feeling, your body, like it knows the perfect wisdom and guidance for you specifically, and it is tailored specifically to you. And that's something that no other human being can really offer you.
Mm. That can be challenging in a world of noise, right? And
Yes, yeah.
so when, like, say when you were in your business, were there instances where like you would be able to really listen to your inner voice, or like do you find yourself not listening to it and then doing something else that someone else wants for the external side of things? Like, yeah, give us a bit of an
Yeah.
idea.
I would say for the first 5 years, I stayed really true to myself because the stakes were low. Like, I was only responsible for myself. For the first year, I had a full-time job. So I could put all of my extra, all the money I made in the business back into the business. And, I had nothing to lose because if it failed, I would just keep my job. And so I
Mm.
felt like at that time, I was able to really stay true to myself and listen to what my gut was telling me and quiet the outside world. Because when you're an entrepreneur, everyone wants to give you advice. Everyone has an idea or a way or a have you tried this or have you thought about this? So there's a lot of noise that you have to quiet in that. And I was able to really stay true to myself. But as the stakes became higher and as I became responsible for, a larger space and staff members, then I started to feel like a little bit insecure in my decision making because I'd never done any of that before. And I was afraid of making a mistake. And I started to listen to what other people were telling me. And I
Mm.
wasn't listening to the little voice that was inside of me. And I think that was also kind of maybe why we started my business and I kind of grew apart, is because it became something for other people and not something for me.
Mm. Which is kind of a double-edged sword in a sense, because you create something initially for you because you enjoy it,
Yeah.
but then, and it's for self-expression, and then at some point it wouldn't be a business unless it's for somebody else as well,
Hmm.
right? Because then it's like about impacting and giving service, but then it comes back around to, if it's not aligned to you and it doesn't bring you joy anymore, then there becomes that disconnect of like, well, why am I showing up to provide this service, or like keep kind of doing this for other people when you're no longer aligned to it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that part of the jewelry aspect of things, like that was a way for me to express myself creatively. And then once you kind of have a business, it's about like, okay, what is in demand? Like what is the customer asking for? And I had to really balance those two. And at some point I think I gave up on expressing myself and I really just started giving people what they were asking for.
Mm,
Which was detrimental for both sides. I think my goal as a designer was always to offer my customers something that they didn't even know that they wanted. Because
yeah.
it's easy to listen to someone and be like, oh, I made this, according to your specifications. But to make something that just totally blows someone away and they're like, wow, I didn't even expect this. Like that's the best feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And especially, yeah, with the designer heart as well, like the idea and the expression and the concepts, they still have to come from somewhere. So they come from the creator or the designer, which is like you in this sense. Um, but then if you start to lose your essence within that, then that will become something else. Like you're gonna lose that part of the style, or that the
Yeah.
specialty of it, because it becomes, I guess, more commercial, or it becomes like any other thing out there.
Yeah, and I think it lost a little bit of its like what made it unique and special, because when I showed up to my business being passionate and sharing what I loved, like I believe that that energy translates through all the way to the customer, and they may not be able to articulate that with words, but they're drawn to it because it is authentic to me and it resonates with them in an authentic way. And so
Mm,
once that stopped happening, I think it lost a little bit of its magic.
yeah, that's so true. I see that a lot with like artists, just whether it's jewelry, but usually in the music world, you kind of see that happening as a trend. You see someone starts out and they're like, oh, yeah, they've got their unique authenticity. And then
Mhm.
suddenly the commercials come along and then it just changes. It starts sounding like everyone else.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was actually just recently at a music festival and there was one group, I was so excited to see them and they got out on stage and I was so disappointed because I could tell that it was a job to them. Like they didn't want to be there. They weren't excited. They were
Mm.
doing kind of their bare minimum and just playing their set. And it was so disappointing. Whereas you had like new artists there who were just so excited to be in front of people. Maybe they were playing for the largest audience they've ever played for. And you can tell.
Mm. Yeah. Well, there it is. There, Kim has spoken and told everyone the truth
The
of
truth.
someone who's gone through the journey. But I think, I mean, it's good as well. Like, if you were to do it all over again, would you do it the same way, or what would you change?
Um, I think I would do it the same because I wouldn't be who I am now without having gone through all those experiences. And I feel like I learned so much and I'm really proud of myself for how far I did go and, for those first few years where I was able to stay true to myself. And now I know a little bit more about like what I'm looking for and what fits me. And, it's not running a big company and having a bunch of employees. Like I love just, expressing myself artistically, but then also just freelancing and doing a bunch of different things and having the freedom to spend my time how I want.
Mm. Yeah, and what I'm getting out of this as well is that for people to be okay with just trying different things and really just giving things a go, even if, like, and taking it to the maximum, like
Yeah.
to the throttle as well, like to be able to experience, like, is that career, relationship, job, like experience, is that actually for them? But they won't know until
Mhm.
they actually take it to the limit as well.
For sure. And I think we all have ideas of what something is going to be like, but you don't really know until you try. And I've learned that growth and our trajectories are not linear. It's not that kind of straight line that we think it is. It's kind of swirly. And so it may not make sense to your brain when you're trying a bunch of different things and starting and stopping, but there's a pattern there that you might not see until years later when you're looking back and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that's why like I had to play 5 different instruments and then I found this and now I'm doing something completely different."
Yeah, it's all part of the story, and like, giving you what you need along the way. And it might be even happening for you rather than to you as well.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
there's always an opportunity to learn something,
Mm,
and to grow as a person, and that's really, I think, what we're here to do is just to like learn and grow and explore and yeah,
experience what we have of ourselves. What can we
exactly.
bring? Come to now, like, what are you working on these days for yourself?
Yeah, so my focus right now is really to share the message of like inner voice guidance and those inner voice sessions, and to kind of demystify it for people because I think when I say like, I talk to my inner voice, it can feel kind of a little bit out there or like woo woo, but it's not. It's really just about connecting to your body and to your soul and just listening to those cues that you get. It doesn't even have to be like verbally, you know, the giving you guidance. Like your body will give you cues throughout the day. So just sharing that message. I have a podcast called The Floating Experiment where I share my journey and then I also interview people who have interesting short stories and want to share their own wisdom. So I do that and then I'm really excited. I'm working on some writing projects, so those will release soon as well.
Great. And like with the writing side of things, I mean, like, who are you doing it for, or what kind of like projects, if it's not confidential,
Yeah,
are you
no,
like doing?
yeah, so the first project that I'm working on, that I'm really excited about is actually a guided journal. So it's a 30-day guided journal with prompts to help people set intentions. So maybe if you're not in a place where you're really wanting to just completely go free flowing with like inner voice work, I think intention setting is a really great way to get clear on the bigger picture or your why. And then from there, you can have your goals. And call it's called illuminate your path. And I feel like it's really just kind of shining light towards your path so you can know where you're going a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, writing is very therapeutic, and it really is a good tool even for myself, to be able to get the things out of your head so you can
Hmm.
visualize it, you can see it on paper, and then really just when you set things down, that's when it kind of imprints back in, sort of thing. It's like an
For
offload
sure.
and then an upload in a
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see that can be pretty handy. Okay, cool. Yeah, so in terms of like, where's the best place that people can connect with you to know more?
Yeah, so I'm hoping to start posting again on my Instagram. You can find me, it's at Kim Kogane, that's KIMKOGANE. And then my personal website is kimkogane.com. And you can find the Floating Experiment podcast at thefloatingexperiment.com.
Yeah, beautiful. And we can drop the links in the show notes as well. And lastly, a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
Where you are right now after the whole transformation, going back in the cocoon and all of that, what does fulfillment mean to you now?
Yeah, to me, when I think of fulfillment, two words come to mind: peace and joy. So
Mm,
my life is fulfilling when I am joyful and when I am at peace.
yeah, wonderful. And the last one, So imagine, I mean, you've just closed this last chapter of your life and now moving on to this new journey. But after, let's say, all the journeys you've gone on in the future and you've reached all the successes, you've achieved quite a lot, you've got the peace and the joy as well, and you're living with your fulfillment every day. But there comes to be a day where it is your last day on earth for any reason. What would be the message that you want to send to the world or leave us with?
Oh my gosh, that's such a hard question. I feel like the message that I want to leave is really just to have more fun. Like, I think that I'm learning to not take life too seriously and focusing on fun and joy and connection. I think will lead you into great places.
Mm, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Kim, for being on the show today. It's been so much fun, and like all your wisdom, I'm sure that people will get a lot out of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun to chat about all these things.
Thank you.